Hi, everybody. My name is John DePietro.
And I'm Bob Zagami with the Camper Report Show.
And on today's show, I've got a repeat guest. It's Kurt Repenchek from the National Park Traveler.
And I've got a great interview with Scott Baer, who is the consultant behind the KOA North American Camper Report.
Plus, all the news of the day coming up right now on
the Camper Report Show.
Hi, everybody. It's John DePietro. Welcome back to the news segment of the Camper Report Show. And Bob, the figures just keep growing and growing and growing. What did you just see recently?
I tell you, the RVIA statistics came out for the first quarter, John, and each month, it seems like each month and each quarter, the numbers get better and better. There is no end in sight to the increase in sales activity. There really isn't. The crazy part, we haven't even got into the season yet. This is still a winter.
It sounds like a broken record here because I say, Bob, let's talk about the news.
Yeah.
Setting a record. And I'm saying, well, didn't we just talk about that? And then the next month. But the first quarter numbers are in right now. And they're just amazing. Talk about that.
There were over 49,000 towables sold in March. That is 77.8% higher than last March when they only sold about 28,000. And again, last March was pre-COVID. There was no COVID.
Yep.
So here in the middle of COVID, we got 50,000 towables and 5,000 motorhomes, and that's double what they did in 2020.
It's just amazing when you see that. Now, let's talk about that disparity. It's 10-1 towables over motorized. Can you figure out, is there an economic reason behind that?
I think the majority of towables these days are in the entry level, less expensive type units. They're easy to get into, less than $30,000, some less than 25. So for these first-time buyers who have not experienced RVing before, they're probably not going to go out and buy a $100,000 RV, but they want to get into it. They want to try it, and $25,000 or $30,000 is not a risk to them compared to what they're paying for other vacations and having the safety of the RV travel.
And especially when dealers have the financing set up so that your monthly cost is really lower than a weekly vacation if you did it in a hotel room.
Yeah, depending on what you buy, you can get into a monthly payment of $99 or $199 a month, and get yourself a really nice travel trailer or a small fifth wheel and head out to the campground come Memorial Day.
So the month of March, there were 54,000, almost 55,000 units sold, and that brings the quarterly total up to almost 150,000. And if you multiply that by 4. I mean, that's over 500,000 units.
Yeah. They'll slide by at 500,000 as long as they can supply the current demand and keep the dealers replenished with inventory. Yeah, they will definitely break all records this year. These are records.
Yeah, exactly. Another interesting aspect of that now that I see that RVA has come out with is that 11.2 million households now have an RV. And when you look back 10 years ago, that number is up 26%, very impressive. But more impressive than that is that look back just 20 years ago. Now, 20 years, you might say that's a long time, but it's a snap of the finger. 62% more families have an RV than 20 years ago. Astronomical growth.
And quite honestly, if you want to look ahead 5 years, with the track record of last year and this year and the momentum that they have, that could be up another 30 or 40% 5 years from now.
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Now,
it only goes up from here, John.
Yeah. Another interesting story that we saw over the weekend is that just recently, Valterra, which is a giant aftermarket products company, was acquired by Dometic, which is known primarily for refrigerators and toilets. They're European-based. It's just another one of many acquisitions that are taking place in every aspect of the RV industry, from the manufacturers to aftermarket to campgrounds. Talk about that, Bob.
Yeah, I think I think this one caught some people by surprise because Valterra would be competitive to a company like Camco with a lot of small products, small accessory type products, where Dometic is known for the larger component appliance type things. So it gets them the full spectrum of the consumer aftermarket product line, from sewer hoses all the way up to refrigerators and air conditioners. So it was an expansive acquisition firm. And in that process, they also got Go Power, which is one of the leading companies in the industry for solar panels, primarily though for the aftermarket. They've taken a big, strong chunk of the aftermarket versus going after a lot of the OEMs for installations. What they have done successfully is get to the OEMs and have them put pre-wiring and pre-connectors into the units for what? For a Go Power portable solar panel system. So with all the minor accessories and the solar panels and the appliances, it was a major move on the part of Dometic, which is an international corporation also.
Yep.
So you're talking about global economics here.
Many times when you think of Valterra, I always think of the hose there, the part where you pull the lever out for the water to come out, in the black tank and the gray tank. What do you call those?
Yes,
Those holes?
the sewer hoses, yeah.
Sewer hoses, yeah. And but I have a Go Power product that our unit is a little older now, so it didn't come pre-wired, so I can just put the wire into something that's already set up. But more and more people are going to solar because, as we've noticed in many other shows, the number of people that want to boondock
Right.
really have to depend upon companies like Go Power. And
Yep, and you have to have the money to put into the capital for the new manufacturing facilities with the growth of the industry. It's not just buying a company these days and getting a warehouse. You're buying them because you see the growth in the industry, which means you have to make more products. So it's good for the suppliers end of it.
Exactly right. And
Yeah.
we've got a jam-packed show. We've got two great segments, everything to do with RVing, whether it is at a campground or at a national park or boondocking or whatever. We've got those great stories coming up on this edition of
The Camper Report Show.
Stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back.
Mike from RV Blogger here. Did you know that every trip that you plan in RV Trip Wizard automatically uploads into the GPS in the RV Life app on your phone? Just click the RV Life app, click the hamburger on the bottom, go to RV Trip Wizard. Your trips all populate. Pick the one you want, and then click the directions to the first campground. Click your RV-friendly directions, and you're on your way from where you are to the campground where you want to be.
All right, welcome back to the Camper Report Show, folks. And my guest this morning is Scott Barr from Kern Consulting Group. And Scott, you may not know all the people that are watching, and all the people that are watching may not know you. But give them a little bit of your background and the role that you played in the KOA National Camper Report.
My background is I'm a market researcher. I've worked in market research for a long time, and based on the amount of gray hair I have, that's probably not a big stretch. But I've always worked in research, and I love it. Several years ago, I made the transition really from hospitality to the outdoors, to outdoor hospitality. And a lot of that came from, one, I love the outdoors, but two, through Jim Rogers, who was the CEO of KOA at the time. I worked with him when he was at Harrah's Casinos, and he wanted to bring the hospitality mentality over to the outdoors. And that's how we really got started, is we took that and all that research we had done and brought that into the outdoor sector.
That brings up a good point, because with the initiation of this KOA report, which was back in 2014, each year it gets more pronounced and certainly more exposure. And the way that KOA is willing to distribute the report freely in the outdoor hospitality industry, I think we could argue that this particular report is one of the most sought after in the industry, and everybody looks forward to the next generation of it, or the next year. And just a few weeks ago, they released the 7th annual edition. And I've been watching all 7, been in the industry for almost 40 years. I would consider this one a blockbuster. Am I too aggressive on that or too optimistic on that? But I just see this as a paradigm shift, if you will, in the way that we're looking at camping, but also in the data that you've been able to present to the consumers and to the industry itself.
I don't think it's hyperbole to say that at all. I believe that our goal in setting out to do this, the report this year, was to make sure that we really captured what happened in 2020. I mean, it's our goal every year to capture what happened in the previous year and what's the look ahead. That's really our two primary features of this. So when in doing that, we had a much more intense conversation this year, that because we had to change so much in what we did in our approach to truly capture what happened, and what people are thinking about looking ahead. And we saw some, I think, as you said, just some fantastic results in there, looking at how camping is changing, who is camping, how we're bringing all these new people in, and most of whom are going to plan to continue camping. Obviously, the RV industry is benefiting tremendously from that, but we saw some results that, to me, even were somewhat surprising. I always like it when I'm surprised, by the way. And just one little nugget there was we had a pretty decent influx of campers in the oldest segment, the 65 plus, who were new to camping. And typically that's a very small percentage, because experienced people, they've camped before, even if they took it up full time or more when they retire. But we saw a new influx of those campers, and it was just great to see. So
What do you attribute to that? Because that typically, for years, the 55 to 65 age group was the most populated of the RV users themselves. So what do you think attributed to that increase in that particular group?
I do believe it was the impact of COVID. And people, the one thing we know is travelers, and especially RVers, love to travel and camp. What I attribute that influx to, though, is the idea that RVing was a safer way to travel, a way for people to have their traveling home with them. They can social distance all they want, so they're able to travel much more safely. They don't want to stay at the resorts, especially early on and throughout the days when things were really heating up. And that group decided that, I've never done this before. They're probably seeing news articles about the popularity of RVing, and they decided to give it a shot for the first time in their lives.
Yeah, and speaking about that, I love this report, and I certainly don't want to rush the camping season, but quite honestly, I can't wait to see next year's report, because this is on the heels of the pandemic. This is the first year in the pandemic. And now this year, as we get into 2021, we're seeing the states lifting restrictions. We're seeing the requirements being lessened in terms of people traveling, where they can travel, when they can travel. So 2021, the 2022 report will be fantastic. But even in this one, you mentioned that there's a 4 million increase in the number of active camper households since 2019. 82,300,000 in 2019, 86 million this year. And you're estimating that over 10 million new campers came out last year alone, which was driving some of these numbers up. And those people are going to tell 10 million more this year. And 55% of the first-time campers cited that they directly tied to COVID-19, as you said. So talk about the entry level, talk about the millennials and Gen Z, those significant developments there also.
The younger generation too, again, they still want to camp, and camping is very accessible. That's one of the great things. Someone can go out camping. That's what we also saw, that kind of boost in the proportion of tent campers. Again, we know RVing is huge, and it's going to continue to be that way for a while here. But the tent camping increased even more because of the accessibility. A younger person can go out, buy a tent and a couple of sleeping bags for pretty short money and go out and start camping. So, those young people, especially the Gen Zers who are really just getting started and who do mention economic issues impact their travel habits quite a bit. So they can now get out. They can get out and do more. And they wanted to. People really wanted to get out, especially we had that initial phase where everybody was locked in their houses, and then people just really wanted to get outside and do more. So they're going to drive the industry for a few years, having that big bump of the younger people. I mean, millennials turned 40 this year. So, that first group of millennials turned 40. So they're not the youngsters they used to be. And they're building their families and their careers. And, this last year was tough for a lot, but I think we're going to see, as the economy starts to rebound, which I do believe it will, as things open up more, you're going to see that group, because we know that once people get out, they come back. They tend to come back, especially depending on what that first experience was. And that's one of the things we talked about a lot this year, is these new people, what was their first experience like? And the one thing we know is that if someone stayed, if they camped, and their situation was a lot more comfortable, they're much more likely to continue camping. And that is one of the advantages the RV industry has, is that when people go out, that first camping adventure, if they're comfortable, they have a good time, they're not getting bit by bugs, they feel safe and secure. That's a very important thing for newbies. They're much more likely, like the numbers are huge, the difference. So in saying that camp, yep, yeah, go ahead.
I saw that 64% are tenters, and the fact of the matter is that if they do have that great experience, as you mentioned, then maybe they rent a cabin or they rent an RV and then they go buy an RV, but they will stay. If we do this right, we as both the RV industry and the outdoor hospitality industry, if we do this right, we are bringing new generations in that'll sustain this kind of growth for 10 or 15 years. The benefit, the benefits are just so great to people and the families themselves. And like I said, the young people that get into tenting. Talk about the remote workers, because last year we saw homeschooling, we saw remote work at home, and the people realized all of a sudden that if you can do it at home, you can do it on four wheels. So there was a lot of activity with remote learning, families on the road, homeschooling, remote working. Talk about the impact of that in last year's numbers.
Oh, it was a big factor. The people who were able to work in school remotely, most of them liked the experience. We saw that, especially the young families, the couples with young children. We'll just use that as an example. That's a real avid group of campers we found. They work in school at very high levels during their trips, and they're coming back. That's a group that's really likely to come back. It gave people that sense of freedom. I mean, I know some people don't like the idea of mixing, the work with your trips. But if your choice is, I can be out and about and doing something I enjoy, while once in a while maybe having to work a little bit, or maybe I work throughout the day, but at night you can sit by the campfire with your family. I mean, I think that's a pretty decent trade-off versus being cooped up all the time. So yeah, we saw a lot of that this year. People extending their vacations a lot more. The kids, I mean, I know a lot of people want their kids to go back to school, but the kids' ability to school remotely got them out and about and experiencing things they probably never did through camping and being in the outdoors.
Well, I think we've been assisted by the technology that we've all used at home and at work. So it's not that unusual that those two blend together when you're at home, even if you're not a camper. But even if you're at home, you're gonna have dinner and then you're gonna hop on the computer, check your email. So it's built into the fabric of our existence right now. And then, but like you say, it's further enhanced when you can do it at the campground, when you can do it at the campsite, when you can do it out in nature, and you get the best of both worlds. And I think that's very attractive, both for whether it's a tenter or somebody that's running around in a 45-foot diesel pusher. The other thing that was interesting in the report was about 6 out of 10 RVers say they plan some type of change or upgrade to the RV in 2020, and 32% plan to move to a bigger RV, 28% plan to find an RV with more or better amenities, and 24% just want an upgrade. So we're in a situation now where dealers have trouble keeping their inventory up. And you're telling us that all these people here are going to want to trade up and have something better, which leaves some very nice pre-owned units on the lot. So the sales activity, the more RVs that go out, the more campsites that get full.
Yeah, it's the industry is gonna have to be prepared for this, because we know, and we've, in our work with the RV industry too, we know that once people start using their RV, and you probably know this even better than I do, that once they get out and experience it, especially that new person especially, they see the things that they want out of the experience. So they're either going to go to the aftermarket to bring in the types of amenities they want and design their RV around that, or they're going to say, "Oh, our floor plan just doesn't work. This isn't working. We need a new floor plan," or we just want to buy something bigger, or maybe they want to buy something smaller. But yeah, as people get out and experience it, and the more they experience it, the more likely they are to change. So yeah, and there's gonna be campgrounds are filling up. We know that, and they're going to continue to do so. The demand is there. Hopefully the industry itself, and I feel like they are. It seems like you're getting a lot more action out there in terms of campground developments. I mean, I told my contacts at KOA recently that in the last few months I've received several calls from venture capitalists wanting me to talk about the industry because they want to invest in campgrounds, especially RV campgrounds. They all want to know about the RV industry, and that's unprecedented. I've never had that volume of just calls coming in just from that group. It's so that hopefully is happening a lot. I see the boondocking sites are going crazy with people going out there. Groups like Harvest Hosts are, my sister is a Harvest Host. I probably mentioned that to you before.
Yeah,
she's booked through October right now. Even like Hip Camp now lists RV sites, sites that allow RVs and can take RVs based on size. So hopefully the market itself is going to help us adjust. I'm trying to be really optimistic here. So
we have to find you a sponsor of a new study, Scott, because you're right. I get those calls from the analysts, and there is a tremendous amount of interest in, we used to say the RV industry, but it's spilled over to the outdoor hospitality because they realize where are these people going to go, but also the consumers demanding more of what they want. We did an interview a couple of weeks ago with Trent Hendrickson at Jellystone Park, and much like KOA, they're not just campgrounds; they're destination locations. When you take and factor in the family, they go there and they don't even leave the resort because it is a resort, and they've got restaurants and they've got water slides, they've got nature walks. So that's another whole element. So maybe we need a study of why investors should look at this industry, and they are doing it. The real estate investment trusts are looking at it, commercial developers are looking at it. So I think we'll see over the next 5 or 10 years a tremendous differentiation in the types of parks that are out there, with more of them going towards destination locations of quality and experience.
And we do know from the research that the KOA type model of campgrounds gets people to come back. They go there, the families love it, especially just because of the like you mentioned, the resort type atmosphere, but the new RVers too, being able to find sites that they can easily get in and out of that suit their needs. That obviously is really important. We asked about the ease or difficulty people had as the new campers too, and as an RVer, the ability to drive and park and find a site for your RV is important, and it is related to whether or not they want to continue doing it, and especially being an avid participant. So again, if that new person, I would recommend to a new person that they not, if they're an RVer especially, that they not do boondocking for their first experience, that they go to a campground like a KOA where everything is set up. And, the campground staff there knows all about RVing too, and they're a resource. And a lot of the other campgrounds too. I'm promoting KOA for obvious reasons here, but a lot of other campgrounds too. I'm not going to exclude anyone, but a lot of campgrounds do have staff on site that know. They know where you can put your RV. They'll help you out, and they'll point in the right direction if you want to go someplace else. But I would definitely recommend that people not go to a boondocking or a hip campsite site or something like that, especially early on. Those reasons.
I agree. Yeah, and you're right. They'll have the resources there. So we will put information down below on the KOA National Camping Report and how people can get it. When I do my seminars and talk to people in the industry, I recommend that every campground has every member of their staff view it. Every RV dealer should have a sales meeting with their salespeople. These are their customers, whether they are today or whether they want to get a profile of where they're going to be and who's the next person that's coming through the door of the RV dealership. This is what they're looking for. This is the experience that they want to see. So they should study this. So Scott, I want to thank you for joining us this morning on the Camper Report Show. This report is always one of the things that I look forward to, and you didn't disappoint this year either.
Well, great. It was a pleasure speaking with you about it. As you know, I can talk about this stuff all day. And please feel free to share my contact information with anyone who wants it. I love talking about it, and there's a lot more to talk about too. So.
All right. I guess this morning has been Scott Barr. We will do that, and we will share it because I want people to know who you are, and I want them to see the quality of the work. And I think this is a blockbuster, and I thank you very much for getting out there this time of year and making it, in KOA especially, making it available to everybody anybody in the world that wants to pick it up and read it and study it. They will learn something about their own business. Scott, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Jesse from Outsiders Calling, and I love adventurous family travel with my wife Jenny and our son Tucker.
For over 3 years, we've RV'd across the U.S. and Mexico, and it's tough to find places that meet all our needs.
Now we plan our trips with the RV Trip Wizard, pull it up in the RV Life app, select it, and go.
It helps us discover amazing new places to grow together as a family.
RV Trip Wizard with the RV Life app is an awesome trip planning combination.
You can get both for one low annual price. Check out rvlife.com to learn more.
Hey everybody, it's John DePietro. Welcome back to this segment of the Camper Report Show. A few weeks ago we had a guest on. His name is Kurt Repenchek, and he is the editor-in-chief of the National Parks Traveler. And we had so many comments on his presentation, his segment, that I decided to have him back. And specifically, so many of those RVers asked about what about RVing at the national park. So I want to bring Kurt in here and say, Kurt, by popular demand, we're bringing you back. And it looks like you've gone from an oil drilling facility in Florida to, can I be so bold as to say, the Grand Canyon?
Go out on a limb, John.
Okay. Going out on a limb. So, we were talking in our last segment about the number of new RVers that are coming onto the marketplace because of COVID and other related activities. And a lot of them are discovering our national parks for the first time. Your publication, National Parks Traveler, is probably the best when it comes to telling all about the issues going on at the parks, as far as what there is to do and what's going on and, long range plans. But let's, in this segment, talk specifically about what should an RVer expect with a national park and the diversity of those RV activities, camping activities as well.
It's interesting you mentioned that, John, because over the years we have tried to address the issue of RVing in the national park system. And back in 2014, I found a writer who was a full-time RVer with her husband, and they just travel the West. And actually, they make it all the way out to the East Coast in Acadia National Park. And she wrote a column for us back in 2014 about RVing for newbies.
Yep.
And it still continues to be in our top stories every year. It's amazing. And there is a lot to know because there are no KOAs or Jellystone Park campgrounds in the national park system. They're all national park campgrounds. And so they don't have the same amenities as you might find at one of those commercial RV campgrounds. There's no swimming pools. There's no saunas. There's no restaurants nearby, so to speak. And so it is a slightly different experience when you stay at a campground outside a national park versus one inside a national park.
See, one of the big issues, the big topics of discussion in the last couple of years is with all the new RVs that are being sold to first-time RVers, is there going to be space for these people to hang out at night, to camp? And, there's been talk of the national parks being overtaxed already. And the other issue with the national parks was that the facilities have not kept up with the new electronic requirements for the new RVs that have so many power usages. And, and the big thing that is on everybody's mind is internet. So how are the parks doing as far as keeping up with those modern issues?
Yeah, it's a good question, John. And late last year and carrying over into this year, they're working on the 21st century campground design and what should it look like and what amenities should be offered. And, Wi-Fi is a big one by lots of people. They want to see more Wi-Fi in there, and they want to see more hookups in the national parks. And some even want to see, more food outlets in a campground. A couple of weeks ago, actually a couple months ago, I was talking to the superintendent of Yellowstone National Park, and he's not interested in competing with the KOAs outside the park. He's not interested in building more campgrounds or enlarging the footprint of campgrounds in the park. He did allow that, maybe we can provide more space for RVers in the existing campgrounds. But you run into a real problem because there's a lot of people who tent in the national parks. And the last thing they like is being in a campground with RVers with generators going from 6 a.m. in the morning to 10 p.m. at night. And that's one of the arguments for more electrical hookups for RVers, so you don't have that generator noise.
Yeah, and that's another issue, Kurt, that when you take that word camping, it's such a wide range of activity. So you have the tent camper, then you have the van campers now, because the vanners are the new big growth area. The people that bought an old FedEx van and converted it. Remember back in the 60s and 70s, you see smoke coming out and it wasn't from the tailpipe. But they're making a huge comeback right now. And then you've got the RVers, and the RVers, you've got the pop-up people. You've got the Class C, which is the smaller ones. And then you've got the Class A's, which are the big ones. And those are the ones that use all the power. And plus you've got the dichotomy of, if you will, for lack of a better word, of the camper who wants to, the tenter who wants to fall asleep at night next door to the bus that has the LED lighting all around it that runs all night long, along with, a 40-foot widescreen TV. So have you seen any issues of conflict between types of campers in any of your reporting?
I know I've run into some issues when I'm trying to settle down at night over a book or whatever, and you hear that generator going on. But yeah, if you look at the Traveler and some of our stories on campgrounds or RV camping, there's a vocal audience out there on both sides, and it's a tough issue. You can't keep everybody happy, but one of the questions I think is, should the parks provide everything for everybody?
Right. Good point. Good point.
It's a tough one to argue.
I know in our travels to, we've been to Acadia because we live in the Northeast, but the last big trip 2 years ago to Yellowstone, we rented an RV when we flew to Salt Lake, but we also rented a car when we got to, what's the city right outside there?
West Yellowstone?
Yeah, to the east of it.
Cody?
Nope. I forgot it last time too. I wrote it down. I wrote
There's
it
only
down.
4, John.
Yeah. What was that city?
Cody, Jackson, West Yellowstone, or
Jackson
Garden?
Hole. Jackson Hole. So we rented a car from there. So we went in, I think, from the east side. But as we were driving through the park, I said to my wife and daughter and in-laws that were with us, I'm so glad we don't have the RV here, because if I see something, if I see some wildlife and I want to pull off to the side of the road, and I do that in a 40-foot diesel pusher, I'm going to block the road. And, half of the fun, if you will, of driving through those wildlife-rich parks is seeing that unexpected animal. And then all of a sudden, everybody slams on their brakes and pulls over to the side of the road. But it's true. Some of those parks were, and even going up Cadillac Mountain in Acadia, I wouldn't want to be doing that in a big RV.
Oh, you can't negotiate some of those bends without blocking both lanes of traffic.
Right.
And that's another point that people have to keep in mind, particularly out in the West. I mean, a lot of the roads were built back in the 20s and the 30s,
Right.
and
Exactly.
they weren't really designed for those big type of ponderous RV vehicles. A great resource is the national park websites. Each park has its own website, and if you search around in there, you can usually find information on how big a RV their campgrounds can handle, or whether there's hookups, or whether there's dump stations or whatnot. And it's a really great resource if you're RVing and you want to know before you get to the park whether or not you can fit into the campground.
Right. Or if there are, in fact, campground facilities, because they're not at all of them. And I know the National Park Service has a new app now that you can gather a lot of that information out right on your phone. So you don't necessarily need to sit down with a desktop or a laptop and find it out. But it's amazing. Now this new glamping thing is coming into big time stuff. And I don't know if the parks have concessionaires that are running those within the facilities. Have you seen that at all?
There was one, we had a story some years back in Yellowstone, on Yellowstone Lake, and the outfitter would set up these elaborate tents. I mean, you would canoe or kayak into these backcountry areas, and you'd come ashore and your tent would be set up, and you'd have a cot in there, and in the morning you'd have a warm towel. And
really roughing it, right?
It was tough. Unfortunately, I assigned a different writer to tackle that story. I should have taken it on myself and take a bullet for the team or something.
Wasn't that movie City Slickers, something like that, where these guys went off to a dude ranch or something? I forget if that was exactly the one.
Yeah, that's
anyway. So what would you say for the RVer that is looking at the national parks for the first time? What should they expect? And I know that's about a 4-hour answer to that question, but let's just talk about the respect for the park itself. It's not an amusement park. It's not the place, a water park or anything like that. It's totally different, right? And it looks different, and the roadsides are different. And
it's not a manicured setting either. That RV writer that I was telling you about, she was in Acadia once, and they were watching somebody who had a large RV, and apparently the guy actually got out on the roof of his RV with a saw to cut down a limb that was in the way.
To put up his satellite dish.
Yeah. But they're not manicured campgrounds. They're not spacious. Like you said, you can't come in with your 40-footer and easily maneuver it about. And you should be conscientious of your fellow camper, and it goes both ways. I mean, the tent camper shouldn't be sitting there with their boombox on at all hours of the night and having a drunken party. I mean, everybody should theoretically be going to the national parks to enjoy the outdoors and revel in the majesty of the national park setting, and enjoy it in their respectful way without infringing on their neighbors.
Yep. It's interesting because that picture behind you, I don't know where it was taken. I know it was at Grand Canyon, but I don't know what rim. But I know when we went to the area where we left Williams, Arizona, and went about an hour's north. So maybe that's where that was. It wasn't where you had that glass walkway out onto it. But I looked at that And I said to my wife, I said, this, and we've traveled all around Europe and the US, et cetera. But I said to her, this is one of the first live events that I've seen where the pictures didn't do it justice. And when you look down to that river and see it like a little thread, and you look across, they tell you that it's 20 miles across, or you're driving and all of a sudden the tree line ends and you look down and see what I would say the national parks exceed the promotion of them. Would you agree with me on that?
In many cases, yeah.
Yep.
And one thing I think that needs to be stressed is there are a handful of parks that get the most attention. The Yellowstones, the Grand Canyons, the Yosemites, the Great Smoky Mountains.
Yeah.
There are so many other wonderful parks that don't get the crowds that are just as enjoyable. They really are.
What would give me one hidden gem in the East?
In the East? Oh,
Well,
there's nothing in the East that's hidden, John.
So yeah, that's true.
I'll tell you a secret about Acadia, but don't tell anybody, okay?
Okay, nobody's watching.
Good. The Schoodic Peninsula is the quiet side of Acadia. It is gorgeous. It's got a beautiful campground. It's relaxing. It's pristine and just so relaxing. You go out west. One of my favorites is Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument in southern Arizona on the Mexican border. It is just a fabulous place. It's got an incredible campground, John. They actually have solar heating up the showers in their shower room.
Oh,
it's amazing. It's a beautiful campground. You do have to watch out for that heat because it gets hot there in the summertime. I wouldn't go to Organ Pipe in July or August, but in February when the hummingbirds are coming around and the cactus is starting to bloom, just a gorgeous setting, just beautiful.
So we want to thank you so much. Let you know that we've been talking to Kurt Repenchek from the National Parks Traveler. Go to nationalparkstraveler.org. If you want to read up and listen to their weekly podcast, they are totally different than any magazine you may have picked up at a bookstore or newsstand or whatever. And if you like what you see and hear, there's a little donate button up on top. Hit the donate button, do like I did, and show them your thanks for that content being available. There are no advertised, there's no big Chevy or Ford or Winnebago or whatever ads in it. And so you're getting editorially independent content. With that being said, Kurt, I know that you want to get back on your laptop and write another story or get back on your microphone and get another podcast going. And we appreciate your courtesy of joining us.
Actually, John, I'm going to head out with my wife and test the product out in the field. So next time we'll be talking from the park for you.
Great. Have a great day, everybody. And let you know that you are watching the Camper Report Show.